Announce the time. The time is 11:01, and ask everyone to mute their microphone and then turn them on only when they want to speak. Announce their name. Please announce your name when speaking. We're on item B, which is roll call and certification of quorum. I'll call on Anna to call the meeting to order.
Yes, sir. Excuse me. Dr. Gonzalez? Absent. Terry Hatley?
Here.
Terry Hatley?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Eric Garza? I'm sorry, Garcia? I believe he is absent. Blaine Sybil?
Here.
Maurice Termite Watkins? He is absent. Dr. Chapa? Dr. Temple?
Oh, I'm here. Sorry, I didn't understand you. Making sure you were calling me.
Forrest Washington?
Hey, I can't get volume on my meeting today. Can you hear me? On the video? I can't hear nobody else.
Greg, go ahead and mute your mic if you can hear me.
Huh?
I think we're having technical difficulties.
What's that?
Well, let
No, I
me
can't
finish
hear them.
calling roll. Dr. Lee?
Here.
We have a quorum, sir.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and proceed. And we'd like to have you introduce the new board members.
Yes, so we have a few new board members. We have Dr. Louis Chapa, Dr. Roger
You can't
Temple,
hear
and
neither.
Forrest Washington. Would y'all like to say a little something about yourselves? Dr.
Sure.
Chapa?
Yeah. So I'm Louis Chapa, very familiar with several of you on here. I live in San Antonio, been working the combative sports since about 2008. Again, live here in San Antonio. I've worked several fights with Dr. Temple, Dr. Lee, great relationships with Mr. Erickson and Alvarez as well. So happy to be on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Dr. Temple?
Oh, I'm Roger Temple. I live in Houston. I do emergency medicine full time. I've worked combative sports for about 20 years, I guess now, and know a lot of the people and have interfaced quite a bit. Excited to be on the board and do what I can to contribute.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Washington? I believe we're having him.
Yes, I'm in Houston. I'm a promoter, a trainer here.
Okay, Mary Winston, TDLR. Mr. Washington is having technical difficulties. Hopefully you can hear me, Mr. Washington. This is something that we have worked with since we've been in this virtual world. I can tell he's trying to get a signal. So we appreciate all of our new members as well as our faithful current members who are returning to us today virtually. And Dr. Lee, we can take it from here.
Okay, let's move to item C on the agenda, which is a moment of silence for Saul Solis.
Greg, go ahead, if you can hear us.
Greg? Greg, can you hear us?
Sir, if you'd like to move on to the next agenda item while they work on Greg's technical issues, we can do that.
Okay, let's move to agenda D, which is the training for advisory board members. Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lee. Again, Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel for the department. I'm going to share my screen. Right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Whew. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Because we have several new members, we wanted to run through your annual training of the Administrative Procedure Act, the Open Meetings Act, and the Public Information Act. Now, this is a short presentation. I'm going to kind of zoom through it. If at any point anyone has a question, just feel free to pop in. I can't really see hands while I'm doing this presentation, so just feel free to blurt out your question and I'll be happy to field it. We'll spend the meat of this presentation talking about the Open Meetings Act. We are currently in an open meeting. The purpose of the Open Meetings Act is to ensure open and transparent government, and that's to make sure that Texas citizens and others can see what's happening in a meeting of a governmental body. And that act requires meetings of governmental bodies like advisory boards or our commission to be open to the public and to be preceded by public notice of the time, place, and subject matter of the meeting. We'll need to talk about a few terms, a few key terms, as we get into a discussion of the Open Meetings Act. The first, I think you're probably familiar with from this from the agenda already, is quorum. Quorum is simply a majority of the members of the advisory board. This advisory board has 9 members, therefore a quorum is 5 members. So 5 members or a quorum have to be present in order to take official action. And if a quorum is not present, the board or committee may meet and have discussions, but may not take any official action. Another key term is deliberation. Discussion is a perfect synonym for deliberation. And that simply means a verbal or written exchange involving a quorum of a governmental body concerning an issue within the jurisdiction of that governmental body. So anything combative sports related for this board. Third, a meeting occurs anytime and any place a quorum of a governmental body engages in deliberation or discussion regarding public business or public policy over which that board has supervision or control. And I'd like to stress that a meeting can happen any time a quorum of a governmental body engages in discussion regarding the business of the board. Lastly, the Act requires advance written notice of the date, time, place, and subject of each meeting. TDLR provides this notice in the form of an agenda, which is in your meeting materials and which is provided to the public and is filed by our office with the Secretary of State. One of the points I just mentioned is that a meeting under the Open Meetings Act can happen anytime and any place. A quorum of board members meets and is involved in a discussion about public business. So I'm sure that raises the question to you, well, what about if I encounter other board members at a social function or a convention? Just keep in mind that if you're at one of these functions, it's fine if every single member of the advisory board attends that event. Yes, a quorum is present. What is key is that you don't involve yourselves in discussions about board business, because even if you're at an informal event such as a party or a social function of some kind, you can still violate the Open Meetings Act if you gather in numbers of 5 or more and you talk about board business. So always be aware of that limit. Some key points to remember: like I said, always be aware of any situation outside of an open meeting where a quorum of members is present. Don't engage in discussions relating to board business when a quorum is present and you're outside of an open meeting. And keep in mind that violations can happen on social media. Lastly, there's also a point we'll discuss called the walking quorum, which you'll need to be aware of. A walking quorum simply occurs when a smaller number, a number that's fewer than a quorum of members engage in a discussion and then forward or communicate those discussions to other members. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that we have a 5-member advisory board. 2 members are talking back and forth, exchanging phone calls and emails, they're talking about their thoughts on an upcoming rule change. They're exchanging research. Well, one of the members then forwards the exchange to another member. So here we have a 5-member advisory board. And now because of the forwarding of that email to another member, we have 3 people involved in that discussion. That's a quorum. And so this participation, we have a meeting of a quorum talking about board business that wasn't properly noticed or held in an open meeting. So we have a violation. So one of the things we ask you to do, for example, when meeting in work groups, is to keep Keep your discussions within that work group and don't forward them to the board at large. As we'll see on the agenda today, there is a time for talking about work group findings, and that way we don't involve ourselves in violations of the Open Meetings Act. Here you can also see that walking quorums can happen on social media. We'll talk about Twitter. So let's say that Chairman Doe tweets without any comment a link to an online news article about an issue facing the industry. So board member Smith then sees that link and retweets it or shares it, and also types in a comment saying it's vital that the board take up consideration of this matter. Then board member Jones comments on Smith's post saying we really need to look at 101. So already we've got 3 people involved in this discussion online. Then board member Williams comments on Smith's post with a comment, I agree, let's get this done. We've got 4 members. And then lastly, board member Johnson gives Smith's post a thumbs up. Now it's questionable whether or not that's deliberation, but still we've got 5 people already involved in a discussion about board business from something as innocuous as opposed to an online news article. So anytime you see a situation like this, always be mindful. Once again, a quorum can meet anywhere and anytime. It can meet in a thread of a Twitter post. It can meet in a thread on a Facebook post. So just always moderate your behavior and make sure that you're not engaging in a violation of the Open Meetings Act when you're online. Here are some good tips.
Can I ask a quick question on that?
Absolutely.
Is there a time limit on that? I mean, if I forward something a year later, I mean, is there any time, expiration on that?
That's a great question, and I have not seen the courts or the Office of the Attorney General answer that question. I think one of the issues is that those threads tend to exist forever, and they aren't purged necessarily after they've been around a while. I think as a practical tip, if you are, for example, the chair or you are the poster of that link, is maybe after some point, after it becomes stale and you come across it again, you might just want to delete it, maybe repost it if you want to keep the discussion going. I know that doesn't seem very practical, but I'd say that is probably the most prudent course of action, so you make sure that you don't end up in front of that court for a decision. I'll put it that way. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay, all right. We'll just give you some tips to avoid quorum issues. Again, if you're meeting in small groups and you're discussing board business, don't then communicate those discussions to other members that aren't part of that smaller group. Be careful when sending emails. Don't send emails about board business or text messages to a quorum of members, even if you're sending each communication individually and not in a group thread. And also, don't create posts on social media about board business where there's a likelihood that a quorum of members will participate in that discussion. We'll kind of switch gears here a little bit and talk about open sessions. We are in an open session today. We are meeting in public. The public has been given notice of this meeting and a link to participate or view the meeting. The board is limited to discussing specific items on the agenda. During the public comment period, which we'll have in a moment, you'll see members of the public coming up, given an opportunity to speak, and the presiding officer is able to set reasonable limits on commenters. Usually that's about 3 minutes in our experience. If a member of the public or a member of the board may raise a subject that hasn't been included on the agenda, but if it's not on today's agenda, we will need to wait till the end of the meeting and place that subject on the agenda for a future meeting. And there, of course, we don't enjoy talking about this, but there are some penalties for violating the Open Meetings Act. One is a civil remedy, where any interested person may petition the courts to overturn any action that's taken in violation of the Open Meetings Act. And secondly, there are criminal penalties. So if you knowingly circumvent the Open Meetings Act, you could be subject to a fine of $100 to $500 or confinement in county jail for 1 to 6 months or both. All right. Any questions about the Open Meetings Act before I move on? All right. We will move to the Administrative Procedure Act. This will be a relatively brief discussion. The purpose of the Administrative Procedure Act, we call it the APA. It's to establish standards of practice for state agencies, to provide for public participation and transparency during the rulemaking process, and it also governs the contested case process, such as when we notify a party that we are potentially going to sanction them or apply an administrative penalty in some way. A rule is a statement made by a state agency that implements or interprets law or policy. As you know, we have a statute that sets the parameters of the combative sports program. Well, that statute is pretty general, and so we need to have rules to fill in the gaps. And so that's, I think, the best way to to describe rules. They are statements that interpret and apply the statute and fill in the gaps. There are many sources for rulemaking. Some that you'll be seeing today, for example, come from legislative changes. There are also rules that are proposed by advisory board work groups, advisory boards in meetings just like today. Sometimes TDLR staff will come up with recommendations for rulemaking. And there are also a couple of other mechanisms. One is a 4-year rule review that the agency is required to analyze the rules and determine whether or not they should still exist. And then lastly, a third party can always petition the board or the commission to take up a rulemaking. So this is a little flow chart of the rulemaking process. We are here today in the first blue box. So generally when a rule is going to be proposed, the advisory board gets 2 opportunities to look at that rule. And the first time is today in the first blue box. So later on in the agenda, I will show you some rules that the department has drafted. Assuming you approve those rules, the department will then file those rules with a publication called the Texas Register, which publishes those rules, and then a 30-day comment period begins where the public can review those comments, can review those rules and submit comments. The Office of General Counsel will then review those comments and either recommend changes to the rules or recommend that the rules not be changed. And so after that 30-day comment period runs and the Office of General Counsel has reviewed the comments, we then come to our second blue box, where we will again bring the rules to this advisory board and ask for your recommendation that the commission, our governing body, adopt the rules. Then our commission will look at the rules and determine whether or not they would like to adopt them. If so, we will file the adoption documents again with the Texas Register, and the rules become effective 20 days after filing. And lastly, we'll talk about the Public Information Act. And we could talk about this act for a long time, but there are just some key points that I want to share with you. And the first is that basically any document or any text or any email that you create as an advisory board member or using that involves board business is going to be subject to disclosure to the public upon request. Now, the default rule in the Public Information Act is that every document related to the public, every document related to the government business is open to the public, but there, of course, are exceptions. Things like attorney-client privilege, protected medical information, and confidential information such as driver's license or social security numbers, things like that. And public information can include, once again, I'll stress, any electronic communication maintained on any device if it's in connection with official business. So that could involve texts on your personal phone, emails on a TDLR or your personal account, anything that involves board business. And so one of the things is just be mindful about that anything that you text or email about is subject to a potential open records request. And also, if you ever receive a request from someone, maybe a member of the public or a journalist who's asking for information, asking for records, please forward it to me or to the Office of General Counsel. Our General Counsel, his name is Brad Bowman. Forward those requests to GC. And the reason is that we have, by law, 10 days to respond to that request for records. And there are some ramifications if we don't respond in that timeline, such as having to disclose those records. And so we always want to give our open records team time to look at the request and determine what types of documents can be withheld or should be withheld and not disclosed to the public. And again, here are some examples of things that we can't or won't disclose subject to an open records request. Things like date of birth, your personal email address, things like educational transcripts or medical information. And so that is the end of the presentation, and I am happy to field any questions.
Sir, you're muted.
Thank you, Doug, for your presentation. And if there are no other questions, we'll continue with the meeting, and we'll move to item E, which is approval of the minutes. And I would like to ask a board member to make a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the October 23rd meeting.
Hello.
You have time to review.
Sir, if you would, we do have a caller in, but we're not sure who this caller is. We wanted to see if it's one of our board members. Caller, can you hear?
Yes, this is Dr. Gonzalez.
Hey,
Dr. Gonzalez?
How are you guys?
we're good.
Okay, good.
Kerry Hadley, I make a motion. We approve the minutes.
I have
I'll
a
second that
second.
motion. This
Okay.
is Roger Temple. I'll second that motion.
Okay, Anna?
I'll give a roll call vote. Dr. Gonzalez,
Yes, I'm here.
would you like to vote to accept the minutes of the October 23rd, 2020 meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. Carrie Hatley?
Okay.
Yes, I vote yes.
Did you put it on there?
Give another count. I'm gonna give it to you. That's 7.
Sorry, can we mute Dr. Gonzalez, please? Blaine Sybil?
Vote yes.
Dr. Chapa?
Yes.
Roger, Dr. Temple?
I vote yes.
And Forrest Washington?
Vote yes.
And presiding officer, Dr. Lee?
Yes.
The motion passes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, let's keep moving with the agenda. We're on item F, which is public.
Sir,
I'm sorry.
but would you like to go back up to the moment of silence for Saul Solis?
Sure. Greg, can you hear us now? Greg?
Yes, I can hear you. Can y'all hear me?
Yes,
hear
we
me?
can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Just want to say a couple words about Sal. You know, he came along the scene back in 2005, 2006, proposing this mixed martial arts concept. And because it wasn't written in the rules, we had shoot fighting and pancration available at the time. So he said, well, let's start with this, and we'll just morph it into MMA eventually with the rules coming in, the unified rules. So he was the first pioneer, and that's why he's known as the godfather of MMA. And he started events back in 2006 where it was just open hand fighting. They didn't wear no gloves. You could hit to the body, but if you hit to the head, you would have to hit with an open hand. And that's when we started noticing a lot of the grappling skills of these fighters out of Houston, West Texas. And I remember it was me and Kerry done the first event there in Houston. And one of the first $100,000 gates came from a pancration fight. It was unbelievable. It was happening here in Austin. And Sal was real passionate about what he did. He created a lot of champions in the UFC and other organizations. And just his passion for the fighters, the general public, and, you know, the products he was selling was always, you know, a class act. I never had a bad showing with him. And we did have one incident, you know, where we had a fatal incident at one of the fights here in Houston. Dr. Temple was part of that with us. And so was Kerry. And a lot of people don't know is Sal took it real hard as far as when with the young man's demise. I know that he himself personally supported that family for many years to come. Just, I don't know if it was guilt or how he felt, but soon after that is when he stopped promoting. He just started working at the gym as a coach and stuff. But he always kept his integrity up. He came to here in Austin one day just to talk to me, and he wanted to talk about the situation because, you know, I had already been part of some other accidents that happened with the combative sports, and I just told him, you know, how I personally dealt with cases like that, and he seemed to have found the answer in something I told him, because after that, you know, he was happy again. He wanted to come promote shows, but he started helping the other local promoters there in Houston promote their shows. So Sal is really going to be missed. And here at the very end, he was always smiling, always getting these kids involved. His kids were always fighting. I won't say his kids, I won't say his father, because, you know, he was like a father figure to a lot of kids, a mentor, great mentor, and a great friend to everybody who knew him. And I just, you know, want to have a solid 10 count, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead, proceed.
How about my big bill?
Texas size.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And thank him for all the time and service that he has given to TTLR and combative sports and helping it make it safe for the fighters, as well as education that he's passed on to the rest of us. Okay, let's move on to item F on the agenda, which is public comment. You can read the subtext. Any person wishing to address the committee must submit an email, and we do have an email submitted for one public comment, and it was sent to the board beforehand. The public comment will not be read publicly. We will have one person who wishes to speak under the public comments, and that's Mr. Michael Chase Carley with the United States Muay Thai Federation.
Sir, we actually have the person who emailed us the public comment wishing to speak as well, Jonathan Harris. He is in the meeting right now. Michael Corley, the other person who wanted to speak, has disconnected. But if he does reconnect, we can have him speak as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Harris, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hello, my name is Jonathan Harris. I'm a certified official with the U.S. Muay Thai Federation, as well as a gym owner here in Houston, as well as a retired professional Texas fighter, and a newly licensed promoter with the TDLR. I'm very excited to start doing and promoting Muay Thai events here in Texas. Muay Thai has been recently given full Olympic recognition as an Olympic sport. So, as well as doing, uh, promotion shows, I feel like the time is now to get things moving in the right direction, to get more in line with Olympic style scoring, to create opportunities for Texas athletes to get in line for Olympic events. Currently here in Texas, there are no opportunities. We have, we do have promotions where it's a show, but it's not the same as a collegiate Olympic style event. The scoring is different. I am familiar with being a former fighter. I've fought under the rule set of the TDLR, and it's more along the lines of what you see as far as pro scoring, and that's for the amateurs as well. What I feel like we need to do is we need to start getting collegiate style events with going off of the same criteria that these athletes will see in Olympic events, as such as the Olympic game, the World Games coming up next year in 2022, as well as hopefully we should be seeing Muay Thai in the Olympics in 2028. My overall goal is to start things off correctly. As I said earlier, right now, all we have is smokers, or we drive to Iowa and other states to compete in these events. So recently I submitted a brief proposal and had spoke with Jim Erickson and Gus Calderon on this. Um, my goal has always been to be able to work with the TDLR to get things going. I really truly believe that is the way. Um, However, we do need officials to get on the same page as that Olympic scoring. So what I'd proposed is for the TDR LR to allow my promotion to use my third party affiliate, the USMF, who I'm certified as an official under, so I'm very familiar with the scoring criteria that they use, to be allowed to use their officials, but it be a fully sanctioned event with the TDLR. I feel like we can get this going. I had spoke once before in September of 2019, and we had spoke about getting work groups together. Um, we weren't able to get any work groups together, and then several months after that, the pandemic hit. But with things going again and events happening, my hope is that we can work together and get things going in the right direction. Like I said, we have nothing but smokers now, these illegal events that are not safe for athletes, and they do nothing for the uh, development of our athletes or any kind of ascension model to get them on track to compete in Olympic style tournaments. Um, 42 other states in the US have this. I know we can't, tournaments are prohibited in the state of Texas. So, of course, I wouldn't be talking about tournaments, but I would like to see us be able to get together some, like I said, collegiate style events, something to where an athlete can come and it's a safe environment, wearing full pads, the same way that they would compete in an Olympic style event for the Olympics. So that is my hope. I just wanted to present that to you guys. Thank you very much for your time.
Sir, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Anna, you said there was another person to speak?
Yes, we also have Michael Corley on.
Mr. Corley?
There you are. Mr. Corley, good morning. Can you hear me?
He said he
Yes.
was here.
Okay, perfect. Sir, you have 3 minutes to speak to the board. That starts now.
Hello.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. My name is Michael Chase Corley. I'm the president of the United States Muay Thai Federation. The USMF is the National Federation of the fully recognized International Federation of Muay Thai Associations. I'm also a combative sports gym owner here in Houston, Texas. I also fought professionally out of here in Houston, Texas. I am here to speak about the sport of Muay Thai as I did in October of 2020. Since that last meeting, Muay Thai has now got full recognition from the International Olympic Committee and was signed into at the Tokyo Games. Over 40 states allow for third-party amateur Muay Thai sanctioning bodies to conduct Muay Thai events in their states: Nevada, New York, California, Florida, Arizona, Oklahoma. Does Texas? No. But why? Why not allow our Texas youth and adults the opportunity to compete in an Olympic sport where the rest of the country is? We've been told that we need to see it recognized by the USOC. But why? On that note, the USOC is not taking recognized sports organization packets until 2022. We submitted ours in 2018, and they're going to review them in 2022. Not allowing for third-party sanctioning has created an outbreak, as I reported last year, of illegal events across the state. Events that the Combative Sports Board knows goes on. These events are carried out without proper medical staff and without certified Muay Thai officials, and are dangerous for our athletes. For over 3 years, we've had in-person meetings where myself and TDLR official Joshua Ferraro have submitted IFMA, Muay Thai rules, and regulations. I've attended these online meetings, and we've got nowhere with Muay Thai in Texas. We got told in 2019 and 2020 that there will be work groups, and in 2 years, there have been 0 Muay Thai work groups. I've been writing emails, calling, scheduling meetings for years, all the while our athletes continue to have to travel out of state to compete. This puts our athletes at a severe disadvantage. In 2019, at the Youth Muay Thai World Championships in Antalya, Turkey, the USA team had 29 athletes from across the country. Not one of these athletes was from Texas. In 2022, the World Games, the second biggest games next to the Olympics, will be hosted in the United States. How many athletes from Texas will be on the USA team? And how is Texas going to field athletes for prestigious events with no opportunity to compete? It's time for Texas to catch up with the rest of the country in Muay Thai. As a gym owner, I'm frustrated. As president of USMF Muay Thai, which fields the USA teams, I'm very disappointed. This is my career. Muay Thai is my life. I'm here as USMF is here as a resource to athletes and opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Are there any other public comments at this time? Anna?
No, sir.
Okay. We will move on to item G. And I need Doug Jennings, and that will be discuss the proposed amendments to existing rules of the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 61.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Again, Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel with the department. I will take you back to our training presentation earlier. We are at the first blue box. We have some rules that I will go through with you in just a moment. I want to give you a little background. So this last legislative session, the Texas legislature passed House Bill 1560, which was then signed by the governor. That was our sunset bill. The recommendations in that bill came largely from the Sunset Commission. The changes to the combative sports program were to remove the matchmaker, event coordinator, and seconds license. And so we have to go through our rules to change the references to those license types to make it clear to someone reading the rules that a license is no longer required for those three functions. One of the things that we have kept, however, is seconds will still exist in their current form. People who act as a second just won't be required to be licensed. And so that's probably the biggest substantive change to the rules, other than just making it clear that matchmakers and event coordinators no longer need to be licensed. We have developed these rules in-house, and I will present them to you. There are also some other stylistic changes to the rules and some changing of gender-specific language. But I will go through these provision by provision. It won't take too long. Again, I won't be able to see hands, so please just jump in if you have any questions. At the end of this presentation, I'll ask you if you have any recommended changes, and I will ask for a recommendation from the board to publish these proposed rules in the Texas Register. That will then begin the 30-day comment period. So we will start with the modifications to Rule 6110, which of course are our definitions. I'm not going to mention the changes of gender-specific language. Like here we had his feet, we just changed it to the feet. I'm not going to go over those just to save some time. The first thing we do in the definition section is when you see the strike-through text, that obviously means delete. So we're deleting the definition of matchmaker. And later on, I guess that's it for definitions. That was the only definition we needed to change. This is kind of the key to this whole effort, which is we're modifying Rule 6120A to say that matchmakers and event coordinators, as well as seconds, do not have to be licensed or registered by the department or by the executive director. And keep in mind, that is not necessarily our choice. That is a choice that came down in a bill passed by the legislature. Again, in general prohibitions, we removed the section saying a matchmaker may not act as a contestant, ring official, or second, since a matchmaker is not going to be a licensed profession anymore necessarily. We do make it clear that a promoter may continue to be licensed as a manager and may act as a second, even though licensing or registration is not required. These are just some stylistic changes, just some wording that's no longer necessary in light of those changes. We make it clear that this is a big substantive change here that in the existing rules, the rules say that if a second violates the chapter or the code, the referee may disqualify the second. The model that we're changing to is that since seconds are no longer required to be licensed, the conduct of a second is going to be the responsibility of the contestant. So if a second violates the code or department rules, the referee may, of course, have that second removed from the event or may disqualify the contestant to whom the second is assigned. Now, we expect that will be for extreme violations, not minor violations. Again, because we had the existing rule, the section says the referee shall hold the chief second responsible for his contestant's conduct. We had to flip that because of this change to the law. We don't hold the chief second responsible for a contestant's conduct. We will now hold the contestant responsible for a second's conduct. We also make some changes in the rules regarding the responsibilities of seconds. The existing rule says a second shall be responsible for a contestant's corner supplies. Again, because of the change in law, ultimately the contestant is going to be responsible for the corner supplies. And so we just say the following rules apply to corner supplies. We haven't changed the text of that rule to change any of the supplies that may be brought into the corner. Just change the wording at the beginning of that rule. Again, here is probably the second biggest substantive change to this whole rulemaking. A contestant is responsible for the conduct of his or her seconds. Violation of the rules by a second may subject the contestant to disqualification, forfeiture, administrative penalty, or sanction. So once again, we imagine that in the event of a violation of the rules by a second, a warning obviously would be depending on the essence of the violation, a warning is probably appropriate to the second. Kind of the second step would be removing that second from the event, and depending on the severity of that violation by a second, we could also potentially disqualify a contestant or after the fight assess an administrative penalty or a license sanction. So once again, that framework has just shifted since seconds are no longer licensed. And the last changes are simply to remove the fees for a second, matchmaker, and event coordinator license. So all in all, some key changes to the rules. Again, they're required by the legislation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Thank you so much, Doug. At this point, I'd like to ask the members to move to and second a motion to publish the changes to the Texas registry.
Perry Hatley, I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
This is Roger Temple. I second that motion.
Okay. Anna?
Yes, sir. Dr. Gonzalez? Sir, you're muted. Dr. Gonzalez, if you could unmute and give us your vote.
We'll go back. Go ahead.
Carrie Hatley?
Yes.
Hello, this is Dr. Gonzalez.
Oh, thank you, sir. Do you?
Yes, I'm sorry. I second that motion.
Fantastic. Thank you. Blaine Sybil?
I vote yes.
Dr. Chapa?
Yes.
Dr. Temple?
I vote yes.
Forrest Washington?
I vote yes.
And presiding officer, Dr. Lee?
I vote yes.
The motion passes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's move to item H, which is staff reports. We'll start first with Section 1, the licensing division. Ms. Walton?
Good morning,
Good morning.
Presiding Officer Dr. Lee and board members, and welcome new board members. I'm Chloe Whalen, Licensing Manager for the Combative Sports Program. We will start with our personnel updates. We have hired Ms. Karen Davis to the licensing division to the safety regulator team. She is doing very well.
Okay, thanks, all of you. Bye-bye.
Dr. Gonzalez, can you go on mute, please?
Staff and licensing managers continue to go into the office on a rotating schedule to help with any documents or any applications that need to be processed while in the office. We'll go down to the statistics. For contestants for the fiscal year of 2021, we issued 198 new licenses, and that population stands at 441. For competitive sports judges, we issued 13 new licenses and 57 renewals, and that population is 72. For combative sport managers, we issued 10 new licenses, renewed 12 licenses, and that population is at 22. For the combative sports matchmakers, we've issued 2 licenses, renewed 5 licenses, and that population is at 9. For the combative sport promoters, we've issued 10 new licenses and renewed 20 new licenses, and that population is at 32. For our combative sport referees, we've issued 3 new licenses, renewed 52, and that population is at 57. For the combative sports seconds, we issued 287 new licenses, we renewed 443, and that population is at 781. For the event coordinators, there were no new licenses, we renewed 1, and that population is at 1. The amateur sports associations, we issued 3 new licenses, renewed 5, and that population is at 8. That concludes my report, Dr. Lee and board members. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Dr. Lee, you're muted.
All right. Thank you so much. Can we move to sub-item 2, customer service? Mr. Nguyen?
Hi, good morning, board members. My name is Tuan Nguyen. I'm the Customer Service Director for the Customer Service Division. I'll be delivering this report today. So we'll start with personnel updates. Since last time we met, our previous director, Trey Seals, has moved on to pursue other endeavors. He was with the agency for 15 years. He had a tremendous impact on the division and the agency, and we will miss him. I filled in his position. I started with the agency back in 2014 and moved my way up from CSR to quality training performance analyst, and then eventually the manager and then this position. So I would definitely be trying my best to fill in those big shoes. The other positions we have. So we have a couple of positions to fill. Our customer service division is concluding interviews for our customer service rep positions and 1 quality training and performance analyst position. Just to give you a quick background on what the CSRs do. So they mainly handle phone calls throughout the day, navigating through our different databases, and helping with any customer inquiries and reaching out to other divisions as needed. And we have a pretty comprehensive workload for them to follow through. The quality training performance analysts will be joining our current 2 quality training performance analysts, and their main job duties throughout the day is producing reports for the division, developing and delivering onboard training for our CSRs, and assisting in special projects along with day-to-day troubleshooting for our technical issues. And a posting for my previous position will be coming up soon. And that's it for the personnel updates, and I'll be moving on to the statistics. So since the last times we met, the statistics for the combative sports have been definitely increasing a little bit since March of this year. A lot of the inquiries that we are getting is mainly related to applications statuses and then website navigations, mainly laws and rules sections. Other than that, I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all have for me.
Any questions? Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry, go ahead. No more questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Winston. Can we move on now to enforcement? Aaron?
Yes. Hi, my name is Aaron Heath, and I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division, and I'm here to give the enforcement staff report. First, we'll start with the personnel updates. On January 4th, 2021, Arthur Revelo was hired to fill the investigations manager's position. Art has previously worked with the Austin Police Department, the Travis County Sheriff's Office, and the Texas State University Police Department. On April 15th, 2021, 3 Attorney 2s were hired. They are Sarah McKinney, Rachel Sesson, and Hunter McKinley. And then on August 1st, 2021, Cynthia Marple was hired as an Attorney 3. And now we're going to move on to the enforcement performance measures and key statistics for fiscal year 2021, at least the first 11 months through July. In fiscal year 2021, we had 27 cases opened. We closed 48 cases, and the average time to close was 317 days. The percentage of cases resolved within 6 months is 27%. The percentage of cases resulting in disciplinary action is 52%. And at the end of July, we had 34 cases pending. As you can see from the pie charts below, as compared to TDLR in general, there's significantly more departmental complaints that result in cases for the combative sports program. And as far as case outcomes go for fiscal year 2021, we had 0 commission orders, we had 20 default orders, 6 agreed orders. We assessed $39,750 in penalties, and we collected $3,980 in penalties. We revoked 1 license for disciplinary reasons. We suspended 1 license, and there were no licenses denied or revoked for criminal history. There were no cease or desist orders issued, and 22 cases were informally resolved, which includes warnings, closings for insufficient evidence, and then other kinds of informally resolved type cases. As far as the cases that were opened for fiscal year 2021, the most common 3 types of violations are promoter acted without a license, then there was drug testings for the contestants, and then contestants who acted without a license. And just want to be clear that these are the cases, this is how the cases were opened. The next section shows how these cases were resolved. And so the biggest 3 violations at closing were the contestants for failed drug tests, contestants for not fulfilling contracts, and then failure to bear financial responsibility for amateur associations. Next, we have the fiscal year 2020 performance measures statistics. We had 68 cases opened in 2020. We closed 73. The average time to close was 267 days. The percentage of cases resolved within 6 months is 46%, and the percentage of cases resulting in disciplinary action was 45%. And at the end of fiscal year 2020, we had 55 cases open. And as you'll remember from above, we have 34 cases opened at the end of fiscal, or through July of fiscal year 2021. So we are making a serious dent in the number of cases that are open in combative sports. As you see below, there were even more departmental complaints in fiscal year 2020 as compared to consumer or criminal history, compared to TDLR as a whole. In 2020, we had 0 commission orders. We had 18 default orders. We had 15 agreed orders. We assessed $46,131 in penalties. There were $9,020 collected in penalties. We revoked 3 licenses for disciplinary reasons. We suspended 1 license. There were 0 licenses denied or revoked for criminal history, 0 cease and desist orders, and then 40 informally resolved cases. And you can see for 2020, the top 3 violations at opening were contestants for failed drug tests, which is 33. There were 5 criminal history cases opened, and then there were 4 cases opened against promoters for contestants not licensed 72 hours before an event. And then as far as how those cases got resolved, there were 27 cases closed with a violation for the contestant failing a drug test, 4 for promoters failing to bear financial responsibility for an event, and then 3 for contestants failing to comply with an order of the department. And next, we're going to move on to the case highlights, and we believe that this is a representative sampling of the types of cases the department sees. The first one we're going to highlight is South Texas Fighting Championships. On September 2nd, 2020, a default order was entered against South Texas Fighting Championships that assessed an administrative penalty of $3,000 and restitution of $1,104. The department cited South Texas Fighting Championships for failure to bear all financial responsibility for an event. The next case is Big Card Promotions, LLC. On September 2nd, 2020, a default order was entered against Big Card Promotions, LLC that assessed an administrative penalty of $5,000. The department cited Big Card Promotions for failure to submit a verified tax report within 3 business days of an event and for failure to pay the tax imposed on an event. The third case is Henry Arredondo III. On October 28th, 2020, an agreed order was entered against Henry Arredondo III that assessed an administrative penalty of $2,500. The department cited the respondent for a positive drug test for a narcotic and for providing a diluted urine sample for drug testing. The fourth case involves Christopher Lionel Lee Sains. On September 15, 2020, a default order was entered against respondent that assessed an administrative penalty of $1,000. The department cited him for a positive drug test for marijuana. And then the last case is Rogelio Narvaez Jr. On April 1st, 2021, a default order was entered against Rogelio Narvaez Jr. that assessed an administrative penalty of $500. The department cited him for failure to inform the executive director of the usage or prescribed or over-the-counter medication at least 24 hours before the event. And that concludes the enforcement staff report. Are there any questions?
Dr. Lee, Mr. Heath, this is Kerry Hadley. I have a question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Number one, thank you for this report. It's very educating to us.
You're welcome.
Earlier today was mentioned of these illegal smokers going on in Texas. Are we seeing a rise of those, or do we have a game plan to stop those? Or I know I get several phone calls of events going on throughout of Texas, and I guess also I'd like, report those to the division, I guess. But what is our plan on that? Are you guys seeing a rise in the illegal events?
As far as the numbers of cases, no. But we only get cases that people submit complaints on. So we can't, if we don't get a complaint, we don't know about it. So people have to file complaints in order for us to prosecute these types of cases. As far as the game plan, I think that heavily involves RPM. They're usually the ones who have kind of their inspectors or their other employees go to these types of events when they find out about them. They are somewhat hard to get to beforehand because they usually just kind of pop up within a few days, at least the presence online where we could figure out where they are.
Okay. And I guess when they're reported and a complaint's filed, then we follow up and enforce that with those people to prevent them from happening again, correct?
Right. So we can issue a cease and desist, which we hadn't had in the last 2 years, but we can issue that. And we can also proceed with a notice of alleged violation against them. We'll charge them an administrative penalty as far as those are basically the actions we can take against those individuals.
Okay. That was just a few questions I had. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you
Oh,
both.
and RPM is regulatory program management.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, very good report. Moving on to Item 4, Regulatory and Program Management Division, Greg.
Hello, board. My name is Greg Alvarez, a Combative Sports Program Manager. Now, Anna, I don't have to share nothing. You're going to be scrolling the form? Okay. Well, we're glad to be back in business. The personal updates, Combative Sports Event Specialist person will remain 8 at the same time. We got Arturo in Dallas, and everybody else is here in the Austin office, which is me, Jim, Linda. Y'all need the last names. I'll give you the last names, but it's me, Jim, Linda, Joseph, Tony, Gus, and Caesar. And we've all been staying busy here. Some come into the office. Some days, a lot of them still work out of home, but at least once a week, everybody comes in. As on August 31st, 2021, Lee Porham, our Deputy Director of RPM Division, retired after 30 plus years of service to the state. Right now, he's somewhere in Colorado, parts unknown. So, and enjoy your retirement, Lee. I know all y'all worked with Lee. He's been with us for quite a while, overseeing our program. And Charlotte Matter is still our Director of RPM, and she's real helpful, got a lot of insight, a lot of ideas, and we've been working with her so she can better understand the program as well as we understand her wants and needs as far as this program running underneath her, which is, they run side by side, so we're pretty well satisfied with what's going on. Now, the stats for this year, as you noticed, they did drop off a lot because of the pandemic. We didn't do any fights until we started back up in October of 20. From March to I think October, we didn't do no fights. We done some fights. And then we had started back up again. And when we started up again, we're the only state that was opened up fully. First, we started off part-time, then fully, and all these other states, the majority of the states, Nevada, California, were still closed. So a lot of the big-time promoters were coming to Texas to have their event. So we did have less events, but we done more high-profile fights this past year. We had to take a break in February just because the COVID rate got high, or the staff was exhausted for so much work. We took the month, we regrouped, we kept an eye on the COVID, and we started up again. Ever since then, we have been nonstop. Right now, this time of the year, we're down to, just because of the COVID rate and not want to put anybody at risk, we've been keeping ourselves to 2 events per week until we see a curve in the rate, unless there's a special event and we get permission granted to have a 30 event, we'll do that. But now we're just doing 2 events. So if you look at the stats, we had 4 amateur events. Now amateur, that used to be one of our top producers. As you see, last year from September of 19 to 2000, that's where we had 15. So this year we only had 4. The reason being is because we had the COVID protocols where everybody was getting tested, and the promoter, the amateur associations really couldn't work that into their budget, the testing, the protocols. That's why we didn't have that many events. Now, the events we did have were the amateur events that were tied in with a pro MMA event. Boxing, we had 24 events. We kept riding pace with last year, -1. MMA, -1 again is an MMA. And we had 5 combo shows. The combo show was basically consisted of MMA with Muay Thai. That was usually in the Dallas area, a couple of them in Houston. The current projects we're working on now is Combative Sports staff is working with promoters to ensure events to be as safe as practically possible. What I mean by that is before we approve the dates, because we got rid of the COVID protocols in the state of Texas, where they don't have to do testing, they don't have to do the bubble. I, myself, and the staff, we took it upon ourselves to talk to the promoter and say, how are you going to make it safe? We don't want to shut down again. So a lot of these promoters have been volunteering, hey, we're going to still test the fighters before they come in. We're going to keep a 20-foot technical zone. We're going to keep social distancing. We're going to have PPEs out, which is going to be the mask, the sanitizer. So most of them are giving us something to go with so we can continue doing these events. We've had some issues where they say, oh, we're going to give you this much room. We have this much room, but we were able to correct it there on site. Next thing, we're providing information to licensees whose license has been deregulated. This was, let me tell you, it was like a little funny story. The first show we had, it was in Laredo, and we printed up these fact sheets. Basically, it tells you, there's FAQs that we got listed on our website as far as the deregulated licenses, which was the second matchmakers and event coordinators. So we made out this handout and we put it at the table, and it got the FAQs, and then along with that it has what the regulations of the like seconds is, you know, what they still got to do, what's expected of them. So we're handing those out because everybody was asking, why don't I get a license again? Well, we told them the license is done with, but they still got the requirements. So they would read it. And a lot of times, you know, we've had these seconds for a long time. This is the first time they've ever seen the requirements. So it was kind of funny that, you know, now that's in front of them, they're realizing, wow, this. So that's been a real good tool. We came out with that tool. So now we go weigh in, we put them on the table as everybody's checking in where they go get it. If anybody asks a question, we hand it to them. And they're, you know, saying that the license ain't there no more, but the requirements are still there. Okay. We're also, well, our new year just started here, so September 1st. We've been issuing contracts to our contract inspectors. We have a new training program. Tony Solis has been doing an excellent job as far as training the up and coming contract inspectors as well as the ones we already had in place. So it was just like a refresher course as far as what we're looking for, what we're expecting, and just the general safety and having the most professional contract inspectors all around. Another thing that we just added was, as you know, House Bill 1560 eliminated matchmaker, event coordinator, seconds licenses as of September 1st. People who held these licenses can still do the same job they were doing before they were deregulated, but now they do not need a license to do that job. All information related to these licenses has been updated on our website along with the new FAQs to explain the deregulation process. Seconds or corner personnel are still going to be tracked by us. We have created a spreadsheet and a handout that we'll give to each designated corner person at the events, so they are aware that the rules they must comply with during the bout. So there's one spreadsheet we're making is the seconds are not licensed no more, but now we're tracking them, and this way when we track them, say somebody acts up, we'll have a database on them saying, hey, you know what, this guy, we had to discipline him 2-3 times for, you know, standing up, for having ice in the corner. You know, instead of just looking them up on the data bank, on the license data bank, looking for notes, now we're gonna have our own data bank. And it was the same spreadsheet we done when we done away with ringside positions and timekeepers. So it's the same format that we keep them for the seconds. And last, on the current projects, we'll continue to monitor the positive test rates and hospitalization rates and the area where events are scheduled. So a lot of times when we're watching news, we're watching the reports as far as, you know, and the majority of our events are happening in Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas. So, you know, we get pretty good reports of what's happening, and we talk to this promoter, and like this last week, Jim in Galveston, that promoter is requiring everybody to wear masks. So our referees are having to wear masks, and so, you know, that's just extra safety that we've been going with. Now, next is the outreach. As the event started up again in October, well, that's what I talked about a minute ago. After spiking COVID cases, October took February off to regroup and monitor COVID cases. Combative Sports Program, fiscal year 21 had 5 mega events. Mega events is anything that reaches over $2 million in gross revenue. We had 2 Canelo boxing events, 1 Earl Spence boxing event, and 2 UFC MMA events this past fiscal year ending in August. So this coming year, we're looking forward to having just as much mega events, because a lot of these promoters and the fighters who fought in these cases really love competing here in Texas. So We hope they come back. We talked to people from the UFC. They want to have up to 4 events per year in Texas. So that would be great news for the state of Texas as far as the revenue they produce, as far as, just here, the tourism, the hotel dollars, just all the money spent just coming into Texas. So we really appreciate that. And what's up to that, Andrew? We're going to go to the work groups now, and Jim handles the work groups. Any questions, guys?
This is Roger Temple. Greg, I have a question for you. Is there any tracking or collating of the COVID rates of conversion in either staff or fighters through these things? I know you're monitoring the areas for rates and stuff in the community, but do we have any idea how many fighters, seconds, people involved are positive after our events?
No, sir. We don't have nothing to follow up with that, and nobody has really called us up. Hey, this guy tested positive. We usually hear of them testing positive that because they fell off the card for testing positive, but anything happening after events, we don't hear nothing of that.
And I just asked because I do ER in Houston, and the last month has been probably one of the toughest months in my career with the places I work, and the state of things in Texas has just been quite insane. And I'm just curious, how that translates, because I've worked some events here and stuff, and I was just curious. That might be, I don't know how we would achieve that, but to track what occurs within our circles with at least, obviously the general public, there's been some big attendances, but at least within fighters and the community of inside the technical zone and the people involved with the event would be interesting to know that rate in the face of what's going on, community wide.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, well, we had the COVID protocols in place. One of the protocols was the promoter was supposed to let us know afterwards, but I don't think we didn't hear too much, did we, Jim? As far as infection rates coming back, no.
Can we mandate that to even though COVID protocols have been lowered, to mandate notification of fighters in seconds and different people after they leave here? Or I don't know how they can be done.
Ask Doug. Let me get with Doug of General Counsel, see if we can mandate that.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Temple, we had that requirement in our COVID protocols, but my understanding is that we weren't getting compliance with that part of it. We actually required them to send us notification after 7 days, or 7 days after a fighter or anyone actually had a positive COVID test. Compliance is just the really tough part there. And there's just not a lot we can do after the fact in terms of sanctioning. So I would certainly approve of putting that back into protocols if staff and our leadership agree with that.
Well, and it's a big chore during the event to create the bubble and to the expense to the promoter and all that. I don't know it'd be as big a deal to just say that in order to return, we just request that your team and your people get a test within 7 days of leaving our area or whatever. And then, that would be much less of a burden. It's pretty easy to find places to be tested now, and that might not be too difficult to do. I'm just curious because, like I said, in the face of what I've been, seeing in the last month, I can't tell you how insane my area and the state of Texas is with COVID and hospital capacities and, patients having to be transferred out of state by fixed wing because there's just, it's crazy right now. It's let up a little bit, but the last month was insane. So I'll stop there.
Any other comment? Thank you for the comments. Any other?
Dr. Lee, you're muted, sir.
Unmuted. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, let's move from regulatory to executive office. Mike?
Dr. Lee, advisory board members, Mike Harris-Mendez with the Texas Motor Licensing. I am the deputy executive director. I want to thank you first for your commitment to this agency and especially to combative sports. I know a lot of you give of your time. That is just to ensure that we have an excellent program within the state of Texas, but that we can be the foremost leader in the nation. So I know that that's what we strive to achieve. So I want to thank you for that. As I get started, I want to talk to you about the 87th session, and Christina Kaiser, who's also on the line, will talk to you about the bill implementation. So let me go ahead and cover my portion first. The 87th session, of course, ended. As you know, we are now in the third special session. The session was a little odd, but we did complete a lot of things, and I believe that we had a successful session for TDLR. As been mentioned, HB 1560, which was our sunset bill, went through the process. We had a lot of numerous comments given by the public concerning the various licensees of cosmetology, polygraph, everything else that was mentioned in there, the licensed breeders. But through the end of that, what ended up happening was that we considered it a success because our agency was extended for another 12 years. For those that are not familiar, every 12 years, every state agency goes through a sunset process where they review the agency itself to ensure that they're viable and providing a service to the state of Texas. So we are fortunate that we believe that we were able to do that. In the sunset bill, we had about 30 new laws that took effect beginning September 1. That's going to affect over 500,000 licensees. It's been noted before, the deregulation of licenses in combative sports, which of course were seconds, matchmakers, and event coordinators. I do want to make note, though, is that there have been various reports throughout this meeting about licenses issued, things that were going on, but those reports were fiscal year 21, which ended August 31 of this year, so just a few days ago. The deregulation of those licenses that have been discussed of seconds, matchmakers, and event coordinator, that started September 1, which we consider to be at the agency fiscal year 22. So I'm hoping that maybe that might be able to provide some clarity as to why you were getting numbers of licenses issued in fiscal year 21. So that's kind of what were the differences there. 1560 also did some other things. It deregulated the polygraph examiners. It combined barber and cosmetology programs. It transferred the residential service contractors from the Texas Real Estate Commission to our agency. There was another big push on human trafficking awareness with signs to be displayed in cosmetology establishments, massage establishments, and then also how to report to DPS. The driver's education courses now includes also a human trafficking component within that course, which is considered the Julia Wells Act. 1560 also allowed for our meetings, such as this one here, to occur online. So advisory board meetings now can be held online, which we believe will increase participation rates for advisory boards throughout. Of course, as you know, we have about 31 advisory boards that keeps Mary and her staff extremely busy. But we now can do them online, which we believe that will help us out in being able to recruit and maintain some of the board members throughout the state of Texas. There was also another bill that was signed, the HB 2106, which established the Financial Crimes Intelligence Center. And this is going to be used to track and investigate skimmers throughout the state of Texas, which is a big problem that we're having now with our motor fuels and the gas pumps. This particular intelligence center is going to be located in Tyler. And just as a final note for the 87th session, we did receive additional funding to continue on with the Texas licensing system. So we're in the process of going through that, but we hope to be able to have one overall arching license system as opposed to our 9 disparate legacy systems that we currently have. So any questions, I'll be more than happy. If not, we can push it over to Christina Kaiser, who will bring the bill implementation report. Board members, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Christina?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. I'm Christina Kaiser. I am also one of the Deputy Executive Directors here at TDLR. My area of responsibility is the regulatory services of the agency, so I'm responsible for the Enforcement Division, the Field Inspections Division, and the Regulatory Program Management Division. It's good to see you all here, and thank you for your participation today. So as Mike mentioned, the legislative session ended for us around the 1st of June. During the session, we were monitoring in the neighborhood of 300 bills that related to TDLR in some way, including, of course, our sunset bill, HB 1560, which did pass. Out of those 300 or so bills that we were keeping up with, about 50 of them actually passed. And so now we are in the business of implementing all of those bills. If you have been at TDLR more than 2 years, then you may be somewhat acquainted with our bill implementation process. The executive director appointed 28 distinct teams with responsibility for ensuring that all implementation activities that are needed are carried out for the various bills that passed. Out of those 28 teams, 11 of them have something to do with the sunset bill. If you have had a chance to look at the sunset bill, you'll see that it's got a lot of moving pieces in it. The implementation teams, so for example, earlier in the meeting today, Greg talked with you about the activities of the implementation team that was responsible for the deregulation pieces of the sunset bill. So the talk about the seconds and how we're handling the seconds now with the spreadsheet and the rule changes that Doug talked to you about, all of those are examples of implementation activities. And that team was headed up by Charlotte Melder. And that's just one example of one of those teams. And I think their work is pretty much done for their piece of the sunset bill. Some of the things that the teams do, they make sure that any rule changes that need to happen are carried out. They ensure that some bills have deadlines for rulemaking or deadlines for other actions that the agency needs to take. If there are such deadlines, the bill teams make sure that those deadlines are met. They look at agency procedures, they look at agency forms, and make sure all of those things are brought up to date with what the law now requires after the passage of the bill. Another big thing they do is just communication, making sure that the regulated industry and the public is made aware of the changes in law brought about by the legislation. So again, referring back to Greg's report earlier, he mentioned that FAQs on the combative sports portion of our agency website, the FAQs have been brought up to date. And if you look at the combative sports page, you'll actually see that there are some little highlighted boxes that are announcing very clearly, license is no longer required for event coordinator and matchmaker, et cetera. So that's all the results of the work that these bill implementation teams do. That was really all I needed to report on. I am happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions? Thank you, Christina. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, sir.
Very detailed report.
Dr. Lee, I believe that Mary has the communication statistics to provide also to the group.
Okay.
Yes, I'll be very brief. Mary Winston, TDLR. This is the fun part. This just talks about how are we making ourselves available through our website. Are we providing what we need? And to give us this sort of informal snapshot of that, it lets us know who's reaching out and why. We get an average of 155 views per day for the Combative Sports website. Past 6 months, that's almost 30,000 views. 30% of those are accessed from a desktop computer, but the vast majority, are accessed via smartphone, and that same 1% for a tablet that kind of occurs across the board. The top reasons for visiting the site: forms. Then we have administrative rules, requests results from previous events. That's number 3. Frequently asked questions, and then Texas State Boxing Champions is the 5th reason that we reach out. This is for the public. This is for our licensees. This is our page on the TDLR website that we find information for combative sports, and this is what we're seeing, and we're happy to know that we're providing information and who's reaching out. It eliminates some of the wear and tear on our staff for our folks in licensing, as well as customer service, and it lets us know what's being asked and what more information we should provide. And that is the end of the executive report, unless you have other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any other questions? If not, let's move to item G, work group reports. Jim?
Good afternoon, board members and audience. My name is Jim Erickson, TDLR Combative Sports Program Assistant Manager. We're going to move forward with our work group reports, and we'll start with the rules work group. Members from involvement from the last meeting, we have Carrie Hatley, Blaine Seville, Dr. Wayne Lee, and former board member Keith Underwood. A meeting was conducted via Teams on December 6th of 2020. The work group joined by General Counsel Doug Jennings. The discussion centered around the initial draft of code of conduct rules for the ringside officials. This code of conduct was developed through looking at examples from other commissions around the country. And again, we had a meeting held on March 3rd. The work group was again joined by General Counsel Doug Jennings. The final draft code of conduct rules for ringside officials was reviewed and approved by the work group. Additional information was also shared regarding rules adoption or changes for bare knuckle boxing and youth Muay Thai. On April 20th of 2021, the latest version of the United States Muay Thai Federation rules, and these are rules that were earlier mentioned by our public comment folks, Misters Harris and Corley. They were distributed to the work group as a follow-up to our March meeting. The international rules were authored by the International Federal Muay Thai Associations. We have a lot of acronyms here. The IFMA, the USMF is the United States arm of the IFMA. Muay Thai was granted full recognition as an Olympic sport in July at the Tokyo Olympics. They did not participate at the Tokyo Olympics, but that is where they were granted full recognition. The IFMA is recognized as the sport's governing body by the International Olympic Committee. The United States Olympic Committee has yet to appoint an official national governing body for Muay Thai competitions in the United States. Currently, there is no set date or deadline for the appointment of Muay Thai national governing body in the United States. The highlight and thing we would gain from if the the USOC, the United States Olympic Committee, if they were to appoint an organization, and especially USMF, as their governing body in the United States, we could immediately turn over regulation of the MMA Olympic style Muay Thai. I'm sorry, not MMA, but the Olympic style Muay Thai that the gentleman spoke about earlier. Until that happens, we're going to continue moving forward and try to, again, either adopt rules or change rules to, again, give the folks in Texas a better opportunity to be prepared for some of these big tournaments. Medical Health and Safety Work Group. The members are Dr. Wayne Lee, Dr. Manuel Gonzalez, Dr. Louis Chapa, and former board member Richard Schramm was a member at the time of these meetings. Our medical health and safety work group has been so important to the pandemic and continue to serve as an important part of the combative sports program team. Many of the decisions made by them and questions asked of them had a short turnaround time and were done by group text, group email, or phone calls. The following is a short list of the items work group responded to. And again, and this was during a time when the pandemic started, we didn't know anything about COVID. There wasn't any literature about it. There weren't any vaccinations. We were depending on these folks, and they came through in a very admirable way. They were offering guidance regarding the initial cancellation of events in March of 2020. Our last event was on March 7th, and as the NBA and all these different organizations started canceling events, that's when we decided it was in the best interest of everyone to cancel the combative sports events. The group also was just awesome at providing insight on COVID-19 virus and the associated testing methods, development and improvement of the many versions of the safety protocols used by combative sports program staff to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. So we took what we understood from the doctors, and with the help of folks like our general counsel, Doug Jennings, we developed the protocols, updated them, adjusted them, and came to a somewhat of a comfort level that we could feel that we could go out and have events again. They were always advising us on rethinking eventual abandonment of plans to resume combative events when hospitalization and infection numbers spiked in July of 2020. So we started up and took some reservations for event dates, but then when the numbers spiked in July, we pulled it back appropriately and waited to open up events again. And the work group also supporting our processes by agreeing to attend and serve as ringside physicians during the pandemic. They put themselves out there, trusting in our protocols that we had developed, that they had a big part of, and they were there for us all the time at all these big events. I'd just like to thank them for all that, and reiterate what Greg had talked about, in that we had these mega events. We didn't start out with an empty arena. We started out with crowds there. First couple were, 4, 8, 10,000. We had one event during the pandemic that had 73,000 people at the event, the Canelo fight. It's the largest indoor crowd for a boxing event in U.S. history. We move on next to our drug testing protocol work group. Members are Dr. Manuel Gonzalez, Dr. Louis Chapa, Kerry Hatley, and former board member Dr. Richard Schramm. The drug testing protocol work group did not have any formal meetings, but information was furnished to Executive Director Brian Francis regarding the current trend of state and tribal athletic commissions handling of positive THC test results. Some commissions have reduced or eliminated the penalties issued to contestants testing positive for THC. The Association of Boxing Commissions Medical Advisory Committee issued a statement recommending lower penalties for contestants with positive THC test results as compared to contestants that test positive for a performance-enhancing drug. The ABC committee does not support the overturning of results of contests if the winner tests positive for THC. So that's something we're working on and communicating with, again, with General Counsel Jennings, as far as what we may or may not be able to change with that, and just getting a better understanding of the trend out there that is, by some states, decriminalizing and actually not even testing for THC in combative sports. Under enforcement work group, the members include Kerry Hatley, Eric Garcia, Maurice Watkins, and former board member Keith Underwood. The enforcement work group has not met since the board last meeting, but a new contact for upcoming work was made, and Aaron with prosecution mentioned the new enforcement investigator manager. Lee Parham and myself had a meeting with Art on February 12th, and that should be 2021. That's a typo on my part. I'm gonna fire my secretary. It's me. 2021. The current investigation guidelines document was forwarded to Art for his review. So there's a document that lists the different things to look for if one of the folks from combative sports or someone from enforcement, a field investigator or someone goes out and views these events, they can go through the checklist and bring that information along with a complaint against the promoter. We also have had contact with IT as far as updating our website for TDLR, and we're going to propose that they put a link on there for the public to go on our website and be able to understand the steps to file a complaint, because we do have general public that contact us at times, but as it was mentioned earlier, sometimes we might hear about it Thursday night and the event's Friday and we can't scrape up someone to go, or if it's on a Saturday, on a weekend. But it would list the steps on how to actually file a complaint against someone that's having an illegal event. And that's it for the enforcement work group. I did want to ask Presiding Officer Lee if he would like to make some adjustments to the work groups, being that we've had some folks leave the board and other new ones enter the board. So at this time, I just put that message to you, sir, that question to you.
Yes, I know this, we have some vacancies in the work group, in some of the work groups. And so I would like to move and ask the members if they are interested in participating in any of the unfilled work group spots. Jim, if you can go through the list and states starting from the rules group all the way down to enforcement, how many are missing, and then get a vote. I mean, we can get moved to get ask for people to participate.
And just like magic, I'm gonna put that up there.
All right,
So
and then, so why don't we'll start with the rules group, and if you can just kind of give a general overview of what that is, and then that way anyone who's interested in participating will have an understanding of what their involvement will be.
Yeah, rules work group meets on suggestions for rule changes, rules updates, any rules that we don't currently cover. So it's a lot of work to it, but we kind of try to take it in chunks and deal with a few things at a time. So right now we currently have Dr. Wayne Lee is on the work group, Blaine Sibyl is on the work group, Carrie Hatley is on the work group, and the number 4 slot is open to Bueller. Anyone?
Any takers?
I'll take it.
Is that Chapa?
That's me, man.
Okay, Louis Chapa.
Dr. Louis Chapa. Thank you, sir.
Oh, and it gets filled in right away. Okay.
I couldn't hit my button fast enough. It was like, one of these game shows. I didn't hit it fast enough.
We have room. Just wait. The next one coming up is Medical Health and Safety Work Group. Okay. Overview.
Yeah,
I can do that.
one, but I don't see my name on those.
You're on Medical Health and Safety, Louis?
I am, and also the following one as well, the drug testing protocol.
Okay, so Dr. Chapa was on and would like to stay on medical and drug testing.
We can arrange for that.
Yes, and like magic, they're up. So,
Me to both those as well.
okay, is that Dr. Temple?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Dr. Temple for the Medical Health and Safety Work Group and for the Drug Testing and Protocol Work Group. Thank you, gentlemen, for stepping up. Enforcement Work Group overview, Jim?
Review and make recommendations regarding enforcement issues, just like the illegal events we talked about earlier, and perhaps some changes or insight into the drug testing.
I can do that.
Who's that?
So this Dr. I can do that.
Can you identify yourself?
Manuel Gonzalez.
Dr. Gonzalez.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
I've been trying to get in all the rest of them, but everybody speaks so fast here. But I'll do that.
So we do have a few other board members who are not in any of the groups. We have Eric Garcia and Forrest Washington and Termite Watkins. If you wanted to appoint them to one of these and then take someone off, you can do that.
Actually, since it's 2 that have not been participating, we can put them in the 3 and 4 spot. And then
Which
that
ones would you like, sir?
said Mr. Washington?
Washington, Watkins, and Garcia.
And Mr. Garcia.
Okay.
We also have Mr. Washington, who's actually a new member that is on the call right now too.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. I thought you said, I mixed up Watkins and Washington.
Okay, I will finish typing this up and send it out to the board this afternoon.
Okay, thank you so much.
May I ask a question? This is Roger Temple. May I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Roger.
So, since I'm new, I just try to understand the flow and the protocol. If there are things that seem to fall outside of these 4 work groups that may feel, that I feel or anybody feels like should be addressed, how are they addressed through this board?
Well, basically, it's presented, and depending upon where it falls, it will roughly fall into one of those categories. It may not fall specifically, but the categories are so broad that it'll generally fall into one of those 4.
And Dr. Lee, Mary Winston here, TDLR. I think Dr. Temple kind of slid into the next agenda item. Recommendation for agenda items. If you find something or become aware of an issue that you think should be brought before the board, let us know, and we can bring that to staff. I always put this out on our meetings, advisory.boards@tdlr.texas.gov. But as you know, we email you guys all the time, so you can just reach back out to us. And Anna is the specialist for this board. So if you have that, contact us, and we will get that issue before staff and before this meeting, if it's appropriate.
And along those same lines, that moves us actually to item J, which is if there are any new agenda items that can be brought up on the next meeting. So Roger, do you have a particular item that you would want to have discussed?
Well, and I since I'm new, there are things that I've been, thinking about. One, and specifically, and just being at the ARP meeting, I had discussions with a number of people about, and I got with Jim just prior to the pandemic with regards to the physician's malpractice coverage and the legal ramifications of us working fights. And I actually called, at that time there were 61 physicians in the state that were listed as ringside physicians, and I spoke to probably either by email or by phone to probably 95% of every physician in the state. And I had that data, and I was gonna, not being a board member, I had intent to, to ask for to be able to give a statement with regards to that, which when the pandemic hit, it kind of fell by the wayside because things just got crazy. I still have that data pretty much collated, and I've spoken with people in other states just about this issue. It has impacted, I know here in Houston, several people who have felt uncomfortable and actually backed out of fights because of this issue. I know that in years past, Randolph Taylor tried to address this. I've talked with somebody within the legal division at one of the UFC events about it, and it's something that I believe very strongly about. And I think there should be additional discussion about this with respect to, our physicians that are working ringside and, medical legal protections for them.
Yes, it has been an ongoing issue. Dr. Gonzalez and myself, since we're sort of the senior members in the group, we've been discussing this since I've been on the board. We've had various interactions with as far as even the legislature in terms of trying to get items passed for us to help in terms of the physicians working. This can be brought up again because it is an ongoing issue. It's slid off in terms of something currently being worked on, and I think it can either go into the 1 or 2 item. I'll see what you guys say. It can go into either one of those. Any comments or discussions?
Mary Winston, TDLR. I believe, well, I know this has been discussed before. Doug Jennings, I believe you're still on the meeting. Are you thinking rules work group or medical health and safety? Either
Right
way.
now,
Mhm.
right now, Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel, thinking medical work group, and maybe just to kind of to frame the issue, so we can have a work group report. Maybe we can put that discussion under the work group report for the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay. All righty. Any other items or agenda issues or concerns or safety issues that any of the members have from working any of the events or anything like that that they would like to bring up at this time that we can add as an agenda item for next meeting?
Kerry Hatley, Dr. Lee, what do you think about adding bare knuckle to the agenda and the Muay Thai to keep the work groups going? I did have the opportunity to referee a bare knuckle in Nebraska a couple of weeks back and kind of had a hands-on experience, have a couple of more events, but I think, both we have been approached by the Muay Thai, did a presentation when we were still meeting live, and then, bare knuckle and Muay Thai. So could we put those on the agenda, or would we put them in the work group to continue to work on, or what would be the next step of discussion on those?
I'll weigh in on that. And I believe, again, that would be, a topic. I do anticipate having rules work group meetings on those two topics. And so I think we could fit that into the report also. And if the work group has any recommendations that it wants to bring up for the next meeting, such as review of rules or anything like that, we can put that on the agenda.
Okay. Anything else from anyone else in the group?
Yeah, Manuel Gonzalez.
Yes, sir. Dr. Gonzalez.
Hello, Wayne.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, because I get off muted and muted. Listen, another item to discuss is the suturing, and that's been a big thing in the last 20 fights that I've been in, where we should discuss the suturing, whether people can do it, cannot do it, don't want to do it, and reimbursement. I think we should address that agenda.
Okay. That can be added under the medical health and safety. And I think, are you on medical health and safety?
I don't know, but I wouldn't mind being on it if I'm not.
All right. I think, Jim, is he on it? Okay. You're on that. So what I would say is if you get with Jim, and then that way we can at least get an initial presentation going, so that way when we start doing our presentations for the next meeting, we can at least know what the status is in terms of where we are, and what the committee is proposing in terms of what we should do moving forward. So that way we can get it to a point that we can move it to rules, or get it to a point that we can vote on it to move forward.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
Okay. Any other items or agenda issues?
Yeah, it's Forrest speaking. As far as like the rules agenda, there's two things that I wanted to address. With like the MMA, I guess it's a little bit different with MMA and from boxing, but I'm thinking that there should be some type of dress code. Any professional sport, if you are a basketball player, you can't wear baseball pants. If you're a baseball player, you can't come out in basketball shorts. If you're a boxer, I feel like they shouldn't be allowed to come out in Air Force Ones and Jordans. That it should be required that they wear sport shoes. And so I feel like that should be a rule. Also, I want to talk about doing the pro-am shows. I know a few states offer them, do them, but where we're able to mix the pro shows and amateur shows together without having to do like a 2-hour break in between the shows. don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Greg had a comment or a statement on the pro-am aspect. As far as the dress code, that can go, we can discuss that under the rules work group and see what you are, what are you asking about specifically, so that way that can be addressed and we can discuss that. In terms of the pro-am, we do pro-am events, and I think that Greg has a comment on that as far as that is concerned. Greg?
Okay.
Greg Alvarez, program manager. Mr. Washington, as far as the pro-am, there's really not a 2-hour break. You could have your USA boxing matches, then as soon as they clear out, then the pros would get set in. When this first started, we're looking at a 2-hour window just to make sure that everything was cleared out, because now they're combining it into one ticket for one event. As before, it was one ticket in for the amateur event and one ticket in for the pro event. That's why we're having to clear everybody out. And we figured, like, yeah, but you could still run them side by side, just clear out USA boxing officials, let the Texas officials come in, and I know as quick as that's done, we're gonna get it started. So there's really no break, and pro-ams have been going on too.
Okay, I got you. See, I only know about the 2-hour window, which that's if you're running a 3-4 hour amateur show, and then you're bringing in a 3-4 hour pro show, and then there's a 2-hour gap. It calls for a long day. What about, like, as far as with MMA, like the amateur MMA? Are you able to do the same thing with that?
Yeah, well, you got to have an amateur association to be able to run an amateur show with a pro show. And like right now, one of the examples is Garcia Amateur Association and Fury. They're run by the same company, so that's why he runs the amateurs first, then he finishes off with a pro show.
So Mary Winston, TDLR, thank you so much, our new board member, all of our new board members. You all haven't been shy about volunteering, and you're, every time this board, we really just have extremely invested members, and it's so helpful for the sport. Greg, is this going to be the discussion with Forrest? Is this something we're thinking of putting in a work group, or is this already sort of handled?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be put in a work group.
Okay.
It's already handled. Just a better explanation to Mr. Washington.
Yeah.
And we're going to discuss that over a phone call, or just anybody who wants to talk about it.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay, well, I think that will answer your first question about the time and stuff, and that sounds like a telephone call or face-to-face with Greg, and you guys can get that squared away. All right, any other comments or issues for work groups? All right, if not, let's move to item J, which is recommendations for agenda items. Oh, we've done that. Item K, discussion of time and date and location for the next advisory board meeting.
Dr. Lee, Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel. We are looking at either late October to mid-November, somewhere in that window. And we'll have staff get with the board to find out what times are ideal within that window. Of course, we've got to wait. It may even be into late November. We've got to figure out when we publish the rules. And then, of course, there is that 30-day comment period after that. So we're looking anywhere from late October to early December, somewhere in that window. And once we get a better idea, we will we'll poll the board.
If we can do the November, at least that gives time for some of these items, particularly the stuff for the Muay Thai, to let the people who are submitting comments and wanting some response, that we're at least being responsive to them without having huge gaps between the meeting times and stuff. So
agreed. So we like it to be as soon as feasible, keeping in mind that we have to have the full 30-day comment period.
Okay, sounds good. Discussion on date and time for next meeting.
This is Roger Temple. What is the standard protocol for meetings? Is it supposed to be quarterly? Is that my understanding? Because the last one was October of last year, correct? And I'm sure the pandemic screwed up a lot of stuff, but what is the normal procedure for these meetings? Quarter?
They fall quarter, but last year was also state legislature. And so that sort of extended the time, because we have our division, but for the rest of the members who are administrative, they do and present to the state. So that extended times for doing the actual sub meetings for all of the different subdivisions in TDLR. So that during session time of the year, that tends to throw things off. We try to meet at least quarterly, if not sooner, depending upon what's going on.
Dr. Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Lee, this is Christina Kaiser. I can speak to that a little bit. So one of the things the Sunset Bill did was to remove the provisions from individual statutes that set any kind of an interval at which advisory boards were required to meet, and instead the statute, the Chapter 51 TDLR's enabling statute now simply requires that advisory boards meet at the call of the executive director. So there is no requirement for quarterly or any other interval any longer.
Stand corrected. Thank you.
Mary Winston, I wanted to add to what Christina's saying. Dr. Lee, you're right. And again, as busy as all of you are, to be aware without us having to constantly remind you, it's session time, we can't have meetings right now, or whatever's going on, you're very aware. So we did have fewer meetings. But aside from the fact that, yes, the legislature addressed that time frame of having meetings, that wasn't always feasible when we were in person, because of so many, we couldn't get a quorum sometimes. How many people on this board are doctors? And not that everyone else isn't busy, but it was just very difficult. But it's going to be issue specific. We don't want to waste your time. Doug came in today and he needs that minimum 30 days. He needs time to get everything done, and then you'll come back and we'll talk about that, right? And then these work groups have issues that we'll come back and we'll talk about. So it may not be quarterly, but we will assure you that we will give you plenty of notice for when the meetings will occur.
Okay. Still on date and time. All right, so we'll let that come from admin then.
Yes, I think Dr. Lee, Mary Winston again, Doug mentioned that we can reach out and just poll you, because he gave a general time frame, which was November, December-ish, and you made an excellent assessment that this will give time for the work groups to meet, because we have this public meeting, but we have less than a quorum that are meeting to discuss different issues to bring back to the full body. So that allows staff to work with the board members, and we can, Anna will contact the board members individually and poll dates, and we'll kind of lead off from our Assistant General Counsel's need based on the rules.
Okay, I think that answers that. I think that puts us to item F, which will be adjournment. Thank you again for everyone coming out and participating. And with COVID being at its present levels, please stay safe. And if you're eligible to get a booster, please get your booster. Thank you guys, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much, everyone.
You guys.